the economic power behind FIFA World Cup 2026, how football became a multi-billion-dollar global industry. The FIFA World Cup has always been far more than a football tournament. It is one of the largest economic phenomena on the planet, capable of influencing global markets, tourism patterns, infrastructure investments, media consumption, and consumer behavior on an unprecedented scale. Yet the FIFA World Cup 2026 has elevated this economic influence to entirely new dimensions. With 3 host nations, 16 host cities, and an expanded format featuring 48 competing teams, the tournament represents the biggest commercial undertaking in football history. The 2026 World Cup is not merely a sporting competition, it is a global business ecosystem involving governments, multinational corporations, broadcasters, technology companies, airlines, hotels, restaurants, retailers, construction firms, and millions of workers whose livelihoods are directly or indirectly connected to the event. Every goal scored on the pitch creates economic activity far beyond the stadium walls, illustrating football's extraordinary power as both a cultural and financial force. Broadcasting rights remain the single most valuable revenue source within the World Cup economy. Major television networks and digital streaming platforms compete aggressively for the opportunity to deliver the tournament to billions of viewers across every continent. The value of these rights has increased dramatically over the decades as football's global popularity continues to expand. Broadcasters understand that the World Cup provides one of the rare occasions when enormous international audiences gather simultaneously around a single event. Advertising revenue generated during World Cup broadcasts reaches extraordinary levels. Companies pay premium prices for commercial slots because they know millions of consumers are watching in real time. Unlike many forms of modern entertainment, football still encourages live viewing, preserving the value of traditional advertising models even within an increasingly digital media environment. This makes the World Cup one of the most attractive properties in global broadcasting. The digital revolution has further amplified these economic opportunities. Streaming services, social media platforms, and mobile applications have transformed the way fans consume football content. Viewers no longer rely solely on television broadcasts. They engage with highlights, tactical analysis, behind-the-scenes footage, interactive statistics, and player content across multiple platforms throughout the tournament. This creates entirely new revenue streams based on subscriptions, targeted advertising, sponsorship integrations, and digital engagement metrics. Global sponsorship agreements form another cornerstone of the World Cup economy. Major international brands recognize the tournament as one of the most effective marketing platforms ever created. Companies invest hundreds of millions of dollars to become official partners, sponsors, and suppliers, associating their products with football's universal appeal. Automobile manufacturers, beverage companies, financial institutions, technology firms, airlines, telecommunications providers, sportswear brands, and consumer electronics companies all compete for visibility during the tournament. Sponsorship now extends far beyond traditional logos displayed inside stadiums. Brands create immersive fan experiences, interactive digital campaigns, augmented reality applications, exclusive merchandise collections, and community engagement programs designed to maximize their connection with global audiences. The relationship between football and commerce has evolved significantly over recent decades. Modern sponsorship strategies emphasize emotional storytelling rather than simple product promotion. Companies seek to connect themselves with the passion, unity, and excitement that define the World Cup experience. The tournament's emotional power gives brands unique opportunities to build long-term relationships with consumers across diverse international markets. Tourism represents one of the most visible economic impacts of FIFA World Cup 2026. Millions of supporters travel from around the world to attend matches and experience the atmosphere of football's greatest celebration. These visitors contribute enormous amounts of money to local economies through accommodation, dining, transportation, entertainment, shopping, and cultural activities. Hotels throughout host cities experience unprecedented demand during the competition. Luxury resorts, budget accommodations, short-term rentals, and family-owned guest houses all benefit from increased visitor numbers. Many establishments achieve record occupancy rates, creating significant revenue opportunities throughout the hospitality sector. Restaurants and cafes likewise enjoy substantial growth as international supporters seek local culinary experiences alongside their football adventures. Transportation systems become vital components of the tournament economy. Airlines introduce additional routes and increase flight frequencies to accommodate international demand. Rail networks, public transit systems, taxi services, and ride-sharing platforms all experience dramatic increases in usage. These activities generate employment opportunities while stimulating broader economic growth across multiple industries.
The hospitality industry preparation for this volume of international visitors required years of coordinated investment and planning that began long before the first match were played. Major hotel groups initiated new construction and conversion projects in host cities immediately following the hosting announcement, calculating that tournament demand would justify accelerated capital deployment that market conditions alone might not have supported. Temporary accommodation solutions, including expanded short-term rental capacity managed through digital platforms, purpose-built fan villages constructed on sites adjacent to stadium precincts, and in coastal host cities the innovative deployment of cruise ship berths as floating hotels, supplemented permanent inventory to manage demand spikes that no amount of permanent construction completed within the available time frame could have fully addressed. The operational complexity of accommodating supporters from dozens of nations simultaneously, each arriving with different service expectations, dietary requirements, cultural customs regarding hospitality interactions, and language capabilities, has presented host city hospitality businesses with challenges that have ultimately produced more internationally experienced and culturally competent workforces, a human capital benefit whose value will compound long after the tournaments. Conclusion. Transportation networks across all host cities have faced their most intense operational tests in living memory, with airports, rail systems, road infrastructure, and urban transit networks simultaneously managing volumes that their designs were never intended to accommodate at such concentration. International airports and major host markets processing arrivals volumes normally distributed across full calendar years compressed into tournament weeks required extraordinary capacity planning, staffing expansions well beyond normal seasonal patterns, and unprecedented coordination with national aviation authorities, customs and border agencies, ground transportation operators, and stadium logistics teams. The challenge was compounded by the three-nation hosting model, which required significant numbers of supporters, media personnel, and tournament officials to cross international borders repeatedly throughout the competition, navigating three distinct immigration systems, security protocols, and ground transportation networks in sequence. The investments made to address these demands, including accelerated transit infrastructure projects, expanded road capacity in critical stadium corridors, improved intercity rail connections in certain geographic zones, and the deployment of dedicated tournament transportation services linking accommodation clusters to venue precincts, represent permanent improvements to host community infrastructure that will serve local populations for decades beyond the tournament's conclusion. Infrastructure investment represents perhaps the most intensely debated dimension of World Cup economics, generating disagreements that reflect genuinely different values regarding public expenditure priorities, as much as they reflect different empirical assessments of economic returns. The fundamental question, whether the public investment required to prepare host cities for a World Cup generates net positive financial returns for host communities over meaningful time horizons, or primarily subsidize the showcase event of a private international commercial organization whose primary financial beneficiaries are located far from the host communities bearing the costs, has been analyzed extensively by economists operating from different methodological and ideological starting points, with conclusions that remain genuinely contested in the academic literature and in public policy debates within all three host nations. The most intellectually honest assessments acknowledge that outcomes vary dramatically according to project type, geographic location, existing infrastructure baseline, post-tournament utilization planning quality, and the counterfactual assumptions applied regarding what would have occurred absent the tournament-driven investment. Stadium investments in cities with strong existing professional sports cultures, established anchor tenants capable of filling venues regularly throughout the year, and urban locations that make them accessible to broad catchment populations tend to generate ongoing economic returns through continued event programming that justifies the capital deployed in their renovation or construction. Infrastructure projects in cities whose post-tournament venue utilization prospects are less clearly established face considerably more challenging economic justification on purely financial grounds, though their contributions to tournament atmosphere, geographic distribution of economic benefits across host nations, and the intangible civic benefits of hosting World Cup matches may justify inclusion on broader grounds that transcend narrow financial analysis. The heterogeneity of infrastructure outcomes across different host city contexts makes generalized claims about World Cup infrastructure economics, whether enthusiastically positive or sharply critical, inadequate descriptions of a genuinely complex and variable reality. The United States hosting contribution has introduced American sports business infrastructure, developed and refined across decades of managing the NFL, NBA, MLB, and NHL commercial ecosystems at scales and sophistication levels unmatched anywhere else in the world, into the FIFA World Cup commercial environment with effects that have measurably elevated the entire tournament's economic performance. American broadcast partners brought production capabilities, audience measurement systems, and advertising sales infrastructures that transform the quality and commercial yield of the tournament's media products in the world's most valuable advertising market. American sponsorship agencies brought activation expertise, measurement methodologies, and creative capabilities that help commercial partners extract greater value from their tournament investments than previous World Cup commercial frameworks had typically delivered. American hospitality operators, experimental marketing firms, and event management organizations brought operational sophistication that contributed to fan experiences of quality that translated directly into satisfaction metrics, social media amplification, and the positive word of mouth that influences future tournament commercial valuations. The integration of American sports business capability with football's global commercial networks has generated a combined commercial output that FIFA's own leadership has described publicly as substantially exceeding the projections embedded in the hosting agreement signed years earlier. Mexico's economic contribution adds historical depth, cultural authenticity, and a passionate consumer base to the tournament's commercial picture in ways that purely financial analyses routinely undervalue. Mexican football culture generates consumption, merchandise purchases, broadcasting subscriptions, food and beverage spending in matchday environments, and live attendance investment at intensities that reflect decades of deep national emotional investment in the sport as a core component of cultural identity. Host city economies in